Hello and welcome to Brick Speak. I'm your host, Brigadier Rakesh Bhatia. In the previous episodes, we had covered the circumstances which forced Maharaja Hari Singh of Jammu and Kashmir to sign the Instrument of Accession, joining India to protect his kingdom from the ruthless assault of the tribal invaders. The accession was a critical turning point that set the stage for the Indian Army's intervention to save Kashmir from the atrocities unleashed by the invaders. In this episode, we'll pick up the story from where we left off and delve into Indian Army's brave efforts to secure the valley. First troops which were dispatched to Valley were elements of 161 Infantry Brigade, which was located at Ranchi but at that time had moved to Delhi to control the violence which was going on in the wake of 1947 partition of India. These troops lacked liaison between the armor, artillery, signals, infantry, and the core units. Commanders didn't know their units and the men their commanders. 5th Division, which was down to 60% because the balance 40% had moved to Pakistan as they hailed from the region which was now Pakistan. So the 5th Division was no longer an effective battle formation. Deterioration in the internal security situation in the Punjab demanded presence of more and more troops. Few units of FIDIV were in Delhi to assist the civil authorities. However, when these units moved from their permanent locations in Ranchi, they left their heavy weapons, especially the 3-inch mortars, behind. Major General Russell, a British, was the commander. 161 Infantry Brigade was at that time deployed in Gurgaon. Brigadier J.C. Katoch, the newly promoted brigadier, was commanding the brigade. Troops which were inducted, there was a total lack of coherence. Accession was signed by the Maharaja on 26 October 1947. The same day, orders were passed to Army to ensure that, that the troops reach Kashmir Valley by next day. There was a diktat by the British that no British officer would accompany the troops to Jammu and Kashmir. Britishers did not want their own people to be pitted one against another. Every unit had a high percentage of British officers. So, perforce, because of the diktat, the high percentage of British officers in each unit had to be changed with Indian officers. 1st Battalion, the Sikh Regiment, was deployed in Gurgaon. It was commanded by very capable Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai. Assembled troops equivalent to 3 rifle companies in the vicinity of Safdarjung Airport, which was used for induction of troops. Delhi and East Punjab area was made responsible for marshalling and administration of these troops. Army headquarters took on induction and control of operations. The only land route was untarmacked and unbridged route via Pathankot going on to Jammu, Banial Pass, and to Srinagar. Of this 300 miles, about two-thirds was through mountains. Hence, there was no alternative to an airlift for the troops to reach there at the earliest. For doing so, holding Srinagar airfield was of vital importance. It was also important to ensure that Srinagar airfield was free from any interference by enemy. The Air Force did not have sufficient transport aircraft, hence number of civil airlines that were operating DC-3 Dakota aircrafts were also requested to put in effort for transportation of troops. As far as airfield at Srinagar was concerned, the runway was less than the requisite length. It lacked navigational aids and safety precautions. It had to cross Pir Panjal, which was at 9,300 feet high and was often covered in clouds or mist. Dust raised by aircraft reached high and it affected the visibility of the new aircraft which was making the approach to land. There were no instructions from the airfield to the approaching pilot. Error could make airstrip unusable and prejudice the whole operation. It must be said that civil pilots played a decisive part in saving Kashmir. This is the photograph of a aircraft landing at Srinagar airfield, and this is how this airfield looked as on 26th October. For defense of the airfield, subunits were tasked, and Ranjit Rai, who was the CO, he contacted the state forces for additional intelligence and also the transport. The latest hint was that the raiders had not reached Baramulla. This information was carried back by a returning pilot to Delhi. Immediately on landing, Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai decided to move to Baramulla. He wanted to beat the raiders in time and space, and he realized that if he does so, he'd be able to deploy on the hills in the vicinity of the town. This would check further advance of the raiders. On reaching Baramulla, Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai realized that the enemy was already in Baramulla. As our viewers will recall, the state forces had destroyed the bridge at Uri, which delayed the raiders by about 4 days. However, they were able to make diversion and were now at Baramulla. Halfway to the town, the enemy engaged the party of one Sikh. Lieutenant Colonel Rai had to beat a hasty retreat, but his jeep got stuck. That is the time he was struck by auto fire and killed. The well-intentioned gamble of Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai, CO1 Sikh, failed, perhaps by a few hours. One Sikh moved to Patan, which was 17 miles from Srinagar. Patan is the only hilly terrain which lied between Srinagar and Baramulla, where hills commanded the road. Having deployed, one Sikh awaited a possible attack by the raiders. On the other hand, raiders were also surprised at the sudden appearance of one Sikh. They were reluctant to carry out any assault. They tried to bypass Patan and fan out all over the valley. Now let's analyze what has happened on 26th, 27th, and 28th of October. Many people feel that Lieutenant Colonel Rai had orders for protection of airfield. Why did he go to Baramulla? At Baramulla, if the battalion had been pinned to the ground or surrounded by the large enemy, how was he expecting to extricate his troops? And this meant that Srinagar and the airfield would be open for occupation by the raiders. Had he not contacted enemy at Baramulla and opened an unprotected road, between Baramulla and Srinagar was free. On the other hand, it is also true that had he not moved to Baramulla and contacted enemy at that location, an open and protected road, which was 34 miles, was available to the raiders from Baramulla to Srinagar. The raiders could have been in the city in 2 hours and was 7 miles from the airfield. Interference in further landing was a possibility. Sitting at airfield, it was probably difficult for the available troops of 1/6 to protect the airfield. The raiders could have also sent a party to Banihal Pass to hold it, putting an end to the reinforcement which reached subsequently to save Kashmir. Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai's action to move to Baramulla was bold, but definitely not foolhardy. He strayed from the orders given to him, lost his life, but deserves credit for having had the initiative and the courage to do what he did. It was a sound move by a very gallant soldier. I feel that this is a question which you should expect in the exam. Analyzing action of Lieutenant Colonel Rai, was it bold, foolhardy, or sound? This was the situation as on 27th of October, having landed at airfield and having left few elements to protect the airfield, the party under their CO, Lieutenant Colonel Ranjit Rai, initially moved short of Baramulla, having realized that the enemy has already reached Baramulla, came back and occupied the location at Patan, thereby providing protection to the road which lay open for the raiders to reach Srinagar and subsequently to the airfield. With this, I come to the end of today's episode. You're requested to please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Keep working hard. Jai Hind.